Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the senior minister at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, and we are a historically humanist congregation, and this is Coffee and Wisdom. This week, we have been asking the question, are we ready to take charge? Of course, the humanist answer is yes. Actually, we've always been in charge, but there is a little bit more to the story than that, which is what I do want to look at today. So let's take a peek. Well, of course, what we have to start out, and we are talking about the monotheisms here, Judaism, Christianity into Islam that has dominated the Western world. And that is the idea from that monotheistic tradition is that humanity is the crown of creation created by this God to be in that God's image. This has led to the idea of the great chain of being, very famous idea. You start at the bottom of the stairs with rocks, then you got flames, plants, beasts, humans, heaven, angel, God. And of course, within the human, there are, the lower classes, the upper classes, and the monarchies. So the idea is that in this great chain of being, everything is connected, and it all starts with the top link in heaven with God, and it goes on down, and that the hierarchy is definitely set within that. Can't quite see the one over here, but it does say here that we've got the king, church, princes, nobles, man, all right, then the lion, and on down. So you get the idea, and this was very much a part of Western thinking for a very long time, and I suspect is still very much part of many people's thinking. Here's a medieval imagination of how God created Adam. Those aren't eye beams coming out of God's eyes. It's coming out of his ear, it appears there, but I'm not quite sure how that works. But you do notice, of course, that God in this particular illustration is Jesus, very much in the medieval imagination, and he's holding a scroll, which one assumes is in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. But the idea here is that humanity is important, and yes, males are most important because God created the system that way. And so we get the monotheistic tradition of the white guy in the sky, or at least a male on the throne, handing out favors and giving what we need. And very much in charge, so off with their heads. And this led, of course, to the monarchical idea in Europe that lasted until, some of the Protestants decided to remove the heads of the monarchy instead. So there you go. But very much in charge, the Red Queen there from through the looking glass. And then in this great chain of being, we have this match between the monarchy, the king who is in charge and guaranteed by God. And then we've got, of course, the church structure with the Pope very much in charge. And so everyone is bowing down to everybody else except for the white guys at the top. And that's basically the idea here. Well, and Niccolo Machiavelli famously said, there is nothing more important than appearing to be religious. Appearing being the important word there. If you want to be in charge, if you want to be in the monarchy, what you've got to do is to appear to be religious for several reasons. One being to underline the structure that is the superstructure that is built by the idea of religion in the Western mind, in the monotheisms. John Locke, many think of as the grandfather of American political systems. Good and evil, reward and punishment are the only motives to a rational creature. These are the spur and the reins whereby all mankind are set on work and guided. John Locke himself appears to have been a deist at best and perhaps an atheist, but he certainly thought that the run-of-the-mill humanity had to be Christian, had to be religious in order to be controlled by this idea of good and evil. The church, of course, telling us what that happens to be. We get to define it, we in the church, and then rewards and punishments. And this is very much a part of the 18th century mind, talking about how government should work, as many colonial governments were being set up. And that continues today. We've got a contemporary, Franklin Graham, who said, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." Rather than, and this is, he continues to say, rather than seeking to stem the tide, our educators, politicians, and judges aid the advance of godlessness. This cannot continue if our children and grandchildren are to live in a country that still recognizes God and upholds religious liberty. Again, white guy saying that white guys need to be in charge. I suspect a little bit of a conspiracy going on there. Well, of course, as I discussed yesterday, along comes Charles Darwin and his On the Origin of Species in 1859. And immediately the people who were reading this book and thinking about it realized that, no, there isn't a white guy in the sky. As a matter of fact, our nearest relative is just slightly more hairy than we are. And this is going to begin to upset the balance of power from that great chain of being. Darwin wrote, "Man in his arrogance thinks himself a great work, worthy of the interposition of a deity, more humble and I believe truer to consider him created from animals." And so we are beginning to flatten that great chain of being, even though, yes, Charles Darwin is very much a product of Western European thinking and started out as a Christian. Now, you can look all over the internet if you want to talk about anti-evolution. There is no evolution in God's creation. And this really opens up a split in the Western mind, very much the case in American politics, that evolution cannot be true because the implication being that the white guy in the sky isn't real. And we can't have that, right? So this is the real tension. And this continues in American social thinking, political thinking, et cetera, to this day. But with the idea of natural selection, Darwin's dangerous idea, what we do realize is that, guess what? These animals that we can see are becoming what we are today began something on the order of 5 million years ago on our planet, as they are able to breathe the atmosphere. Homo sapiens is way over here, not even 1 million years old. And so suddenly we are a little blip on a very long time frame. Why are we more important than the humanoids on the other end of that 5 million year timeline? Well, probably we aren't, as a matter of fact, and that's one of the implications of Darwin's dangerous idea. And, we still are working on this idea. How should we represent how all of this looks? Because it really isn't a straight line. As a matter of fact, there are all kinds of branches going off in different kinds of humanoid forms. For example, Neanderthals are over there. Many Homo sapiens have a lot of Neanderthal DNA. This is a fairly recent discovery that this is true, and it has become important in the research of the COVID-19 pandemic, I understand. So, kind of interesting how our DNA works, but guess what? We are somewhere on this continuum in terms of our DNA. And this orangutan thinks that's just fine, unlike Franklin Graham. Darwin wrote in his notebook in 1837, and he didn't publish this idea exactly like this, but I think it's very telling that even a year after he got off the ship, as he was thinking through these things, he did write this. If we choose to let conjecture run wild, then animals, our fellow brethren in pain, diseases, death, suffering, and famine, our slaves in the most laborious works, our companions in our amusements, they may partake our origin in one common ancestor. We may be all netted together. And yes, it's a web, it's not a chain, is the implication. All of humanity are related. There's no hierarchy within humanity itself, and there's not even a hierarchy within the animal kingdom in Darwin's most insightful way of thinking about this. But again, he didn't publish this one. But we do know it has been found, the page in which Darwin in his notebook said, "I think," and he begins to draw these branches off, and he thinks that's how it worked. And indeed, that's still today the way that we think it probably happened. We started from something, see, one down here at the bottom, and all of these branches, and that is the incredible complexity of life on our planet. Yeah, so I think there you have it, the great eureka moment for Darwin. So what happened? Well, this great chain of being with non-being at the bottom, minerals, rocks, they don't have any being, going on up to the top to the great being, God. Well, okay, that's probably not true. And as a matter of fact, we have now, many of us are thinking in the way that instead of humanity being in the center of all of this, we're going toward an idea of what's being called object-oriented ontology. That is, instead of everything circling around the human, guess what? Humanity is just another being in this great circle of being. We are part of the web, but we aren't any more important, aside from ourselves, of course, than any of the other creatures, and even the rocks and trees. Many object-oriented ontologists say, no, nothing is actually an object. We just make them objects in our own mind. So that's one of the great thoughts for our own time. And it took us a few years after 1859 to really get there, but more and more people are looking and thinking in that direction. But yes, it does break the great chain of being. The weak link in the great chain of being is there's no great chain of being. So I couldn't stop things today without putting one more cute monkey picture in, of course. Oh, look at their faces. Yep, well, because we recognize ourselves, don't we? We know exactly what kind of awe, wonder, and fun they're having because we look just like that. Thanks a lot for listening today about the great chain of being and object-oriented ontology. Tonight at 7 Central Time, Bibles and Beer. This week, Getting Judgy, Deborah and Ehud. Ehud being one of the great knifers in Hebrew Scripture. Yeah, he's quite the assassin there. We'll be talking about those two judges tonight from a humanistic perspective. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you later.